1st of May is celebrated as a Workers' Day globally, and the labour sector in South Africa is in crisis, given the latest unemployment figures now standing at 35%, or just over 35%. We take a look at workers' rights over the years. We're joined by Trevor Shaku, Saftu Spokesperson. Thank you very much for availing yourself this afternoon. How would you then maybe perhaps characterize the labour space in South Africa?
Good day and thanks for having us. The important issues which I think can be highlighted is that the situation and the conditions of workers in the country have worsened 28 years into democracy. For instance, the living standards of our people also are declining because of the wage freezes, the wage cuts, or the suppression of wages below what we call the inflation target or the inflation rate. Since 1992, you have the wage trends going down versus wage profit trends which have been going up. And this is on the basis that capitalists and enterprise employers and bosses have been focused more on extracting profit out of their enterprises rather than meeting or conceding to demands for wage increments in this country. And as a result, you have had to face with a huge population of the working class or the working people who earn far less than even the minimum wage. The minimum wage has tried to equalize and standardize the wages or remuneration of workers, but you can see on the basis of the rising levels of the rising living standards in the country, you will realize that with the publication of the Household Affordability Index in the country, which was published by the Economic Justice Group, which is a research group in Pietermaritzburg, that the average household grocery cost about 4,350, and that on its own is way above the minimum wage, which is standing at around 4,100 per month. Now, that on its own shows you that the living standards of our people have been declining. But on the other side, the question and the context, or in the context of unemployment has risen, I think, between 29% to 35% in the last 2 years. And if you then factor in those who have given up looking for jobs, you realize that you have about 12.5 million population of the labor force, which is not able to find any employment because the capitalists are focused more on restructuring their enterprises rather than creating jobs. And remember, one factor, one element, key element of this restructuring, it's either wage cuts, wage freezes, or most recently, as we've seen with the conditions in Clover and other companies' retrenchments. Clover, for instance, has retrenched about 2,700 workers in 2021-2022 alone. That period shows you that if you have such a whooping loss of jobs only in one company, what will be happening to workers across all industries and across all sectors of the economy? Now, if you look at the public sector, you are also having a conundrum where government insistence on embarking on neoliberal budget cuts has actually led to what we call the reduction in the headcount of the public servants in the public sector. Hospitals are understaffed, schools are understaffed, police stations are understaffed, but in addition to that, you then also have the conditions which are not conducive for workers to be able to work in that, because there's lack of infrastructure, there's lack of working equipment, and all this constitute a serious crisis for workers in this country, and nothing seems to be improving. Especially if
Mr.
they
Shaku, please allow me
have
to join you there, if you will. And with this lack of improvements, then enters labor unions like yourselves. What is your relevance, I guess, today, especially as Saftu, you've been plagued by very public spats within the organization and have been accused by some sectors of society of putting personalities ahead of the needs of workers?
The trade union movement cannot be insulated from the conflicts which can characterize any form of organization. That's the first point one must make. But secondly, we must make a point that the trade union movement, significant reduction in terms of its, for instance, density. What has happened in the past period is that the trade union density has declined so much that 77% of the working force is not unionized. Now, that on its own creates problems for the trade union movement in as far as negotiation, bargaining, and even striking is concerned. Now, trade unions then enter the terrain to try by all means. Of course, they're characterized by two factors. The first factor is that they have their own problems as organizations. But secondly, you have the conditions of work changing in the country from the first industrial revolution to the fourth industrial revolution. These processes which have revolutionized the productive forces or the means of production have also at every particular historical epoch changed the productive forces which have changed the character of worker itself. And what has grown so far is that you have a worker who, if the trade union is not moving with speed to try to adapt to the changing character of the worker, because the current worker is a precarious worker, and this is the system creation. The system is driving us towards that particular end where the worker cannot be unionized so easily. Now, the trade unions must enter the space first and foremost in trying to understand objectively what is this character, the new character of this changing character of worker, and how do we as unions try to adapt ourselves first and foremost to try to recruit them and also be more appealing to them. But most importantly, given our own conflicts which we might be having in various federations and trade unions, which goes to leadership strives, leadership conflicts, we can also always transcend that. And these are some of the factors which subjectively play a particular role in that particular space where you find workers now beginning to complain that the trade unions are no longer having the interests of workers at heart and all that. But the Central Committee of Saftu in 2021 resolved to ensure that it is going to study first and foremost and have a commission on the changing character of worker, analyze this particular worker, but most importantly, what would be Saftu's adaptive modes of organizing, organizing these sectors which are mushrooming in various industries as a result of the development of productive forces. So as a result of that, we think that the Federation would be able and well placed to ensure that it plays a role in recruiting the 77% of people who are not employed. The other element, maybe just one last point, but the other element which I must make, the other aspect which I must point out relates to the question of, you see, with the declining trade union density, the employers, the bosses are emboldened to take various steps, knowing very well that there may not be protracted fightbacks from the working class movement itself. Now, on the basis of this, you have seen, for instance, in the public sector, the capitulation of trade unions in there has led them to concede to a program which is set to cut 3.3 billion rands in the public sector wage bill. And this will have disastrous consequences for the public service, delivery of public service, and in particular, even the well-being of workers.
Unfortunately, we are losing you there intermittently, but point well made. Trevor Shaku speaks for Saftu. Thank you for availing yourself this afternoon.